The stars had been sealed long before humanity first shaped words from breath and stone. Across the void, ancient beings known only as the Sentinels anchored their vast constructs, gates of obsidian and starlight to the rims of habitable systems. They had no hunger, no anger, no empathy. They served a singular purpose, containment. What lay beyond was a tapestry of countless civilizations, thriving and warring in measures beyond human imagining. What lay within was a cradle deliberately forgotten: humanity. Earth's ascent was a whisper at first, suborbital hops, broken transmissions leaking into the black, hesitant steps to the Moon and Mars. To the Sentinels, this was the random noise of a primitive species, a statistical inevitability. They observed but did not act. It had been countless eons since any force within the cradle had mattered. But humanity was different. It was in the 3rd century of the interstellar age that humanity first encountered the threshold. The Solar Federation's fleet, an amalgamation of Earth, Luna, and Mars, had expanded outward, settling the nearer stars with fusion drives and ingenuity. Each new colony had sharpened human will, binding them not through blood but through purpose. Still, they found the universe oddly empty. No sign of aliens, no ruins, only silence. Until the barrier at Gliese 581. The fleet's scout ship, Dauntless Venture, moved toward what it believed to be an anomalous gravitational shadow. Instruments fluctuated wildly. Reality itself seemed to warp. And then it appeared, a titanic gate of black crystal orbiting the star like a grim, forgotten deity. Beyond it, glimpses of other systems, spectral in their vibrancy, flickered like taunts. The moment the Dauntless Venture sent a transmission back, the Sentinels stirred. They arrived without warning, monoliths of living metal, each sentinel 100 kilometers in length, moving through subspace like predators through deep water. They dwarfed even humanity's most ambitious constructs. Without pause, they unleashed a pulse of energy that unraveled the Dauntless Venture into quarks and photons. The message was clear. Earth received the garbled final broadcast, a searing image of the Black Gate and the brief glimpse of the Sentinel. It was enough to ignite a fire that no ancient edict could smother. Admiral Sana Varga, Supreme Commander of the Solar Federation's Defense Forces, stood before the United Assembly in Geneva. Her voice, rough with weeks of urgency, reverberated through the chamber. "They have penned us in like livestock. Some ancient power decided we were not ready, not worthy. I say we tear down their walls." Debate raged for days, but the outcome was inevitable. Humanity had never accepted chains, not from kings, not from gods, and certainly not from silent custodians of a forgotten past. A new initiative was born, Project Breach. On the industrial moons of Jupiter and the forge worlds of Ceres, humanity poured its collective might into war. New classes of starships, not for exploration but for battle, began to take shape. Not larger, for they could never match the Sentinels in mass. Instead, they were sharper, faster, built for agility and unpredictability. Artificial intelligences evolved alongside human crews, not in subservience but in symbiosis. Weapons based on dark energy manipulation and gravitational shear were theorized, then realized through sleepless effort. And through it all, Earth's brightest minds wrestled with the single greatest riddle: how to breach the Sentinel-guarded gates. Dr. Jian Wu, a physicist renowned for bending the impossible to human will, proposed a method known as quantum phase tunneling. Instead of matching the Sentinels in brute force, humanity would sidestep them, phasing portions of their fleets in and out of higher dimensions to slip through the barriers like thieves in the night. The first trials were disastrous. Ships reappeared twisted and lifeless, crews fused with hulls, minds shattered by the glimpse of non-Euclidean nightmares. But humanity learned, adapted, refined. 5 years after the massacre of the Dauntless Venture, the first breach fleet was ready. Admiral Varga herself took command aboard the SFNS Resolute, a ship that bristled with every piece of humanity's desperate ingenuity. 28 vessels, a mix of battle cruisers, skirmishers, and tunneling platforms, formed a spearhead aimed at Gliese 581. As the fleet mustered beyond Neptune's orbit, civilians across the Solar Federation watched from arcology's ocean cities and lunar citadels. No one spoke of victory, only necessity. The first breach fleet engaged quantum phase tunneling drives. Reality cracked. In an instant stretched to infinity, the stars themselves seemed to blink, and humanity's vanguard tore into forbidden space. They re-emerged within proximity of the Black Gate. The Sentinels were waiting. 3 of them, each a continent of armor and will, moved to intercept. Their presence crushed thought, broadcasting alien warnings into every mind: return, cease, be unmade. Admiral Varga gritted her teeth, her command deck alive with frantic data streams. Forward all power to disruption fields, target weak points in their structure. Move in pairs, no single ship alone, we strike or we die. The human ship surged forward, like insects challenging gods. The Sentinels reacted with terrifying speed. One unleashed an energy net that swallowed a destroyer whole, collapsing it into a singularity. Another emitted a gravitational pulse that shattered a cruiser across 6 dimensions. But humanity had never been creatures of predictability. The skirmishers darted, weaving impossible patterns, baiting the Sentinels into overextensions. Graviton lances fired in synchronized volleys, gouging superficial wounds into the ancient armor. Then, at the heart of the fray, the Resolute's tunneling platform activated its final gambit. Dr. Wu's breakthrough, a micro-singularity drive, ignited, punching a localized hole through the gate's field. For a moment, space twisted, a scream of violated physics. "All ships breach now," Varga roared. 5 vessels made it through before the Sentinels collapsed the wound, sealing the breach with incomprehensible force. The rest, including the Resolute, were left to fight against impossible odds. As the 5 ships, scarred, battered but alive, hurtled into uncharted space, humanity's resolve burned brighter than a supernova. For the first time in countless millennia, the outer galaxy felt the footfall of humankind. And the age of containment began to end. The 5 surviving ships tumbled out of the breach, instruments blind, hulls groaning under stresses not yet understood. Beyond them, a different galaxy stretched wide, raw and brimming with impossible life. Nebulae twisted in violent hues unknown to human astronomy. Stars burned with anomalous spectra. And in the darkness between, civilizations moved like colossal schools of thought and metal, unaware that a new force had just torn into their protected domain. The fleet reorganized swiftly. Command defaulted to Captain Ilya's reign of the SFNS Verity, the largest ship to survive the breach. On the bridge, Rain surveyed the trembling data. Communications blackout with home, no way back without a new breach. He turned to his officers, their faces lit by cold blue screens. "We proceed forward, find shelter, find allies, or we perish." The first contact came within days. A flotilla of alien vessels, delicate as spider silk but armed with weapons beyond human design, intercepted them near a star cradled by rings of diamond dust. These were the Cressariae, beings of crystalline thought and organic machine symbiosis, their entire culture woven through neural latticeworks that spanned their territory. The Cressariae regarded humanity as anomalies, breaches in the ancient containment. Their communications were like fractal songs, patterns meant to probe rather than speak. Humanity answered not with brute force but with language. Linguist officer Anna Solari led the efforts, sacrificing sleep and sanity to untangle meaning from madness. After cycles of encrypted thought exchange, the Cressariae began to understand. And what they learned terrified them. The Cressariae sang of the Pact of the 10,000 Races, an ancient covenant enforced by the Sentinels. Long ago, the galaxy had burned in wars of unchecked ambition. The Sentinels had been created by the survivors, artifacts of law without mercy, sealing away dangerous potentials, including any future threats rising from less revolved cradles. Humanity's escape was a fracture in that order, a sin against a code so old it had become myth. The Cressariae debated among themselves. Some argued for immediate annihilation of the human breach fleet to cauterize the wound. Others, sensing opportunity, proposed a different path. Captain Rain exploited that division. He offered humanity's greatest currency, unpredictability, innovation, the potential to change stagnation. He spoke of alliances, of shaking loose the old order, of a place for the Cressariae beyond the shadow of the Sentinels. Reluctantly, a faction of the Cressariae agreed to shelter the breach fleet within one of their hidden lattice worlds, Ilmaris. Ilmaris was a hollow world orbiting a black star, a sanctuary outside the normal spacetime folds of the sector. There, humanity began its desperate rebuilding. Supplies were scarce, every system had to be cannibalized and re-engineered. The Cressariae shared only scraps of their technology, unwilling to risk full contamination, yet even these scraps were enough. Human engineers, forced to innovate under starvation conditions, turned Cressariae concepts into lethal designs: self-healing armor, energy lattice weapons, adaptive field drives. Meanwhile, the Sentinels had not been idle. Sensors aboard Ilmaris detected their movements across the sector. Silent, patient, inhuman, they were reorganizing. It became clear that the breach fleet had triggered something ancient, a recall protocol. More Sentinels were being summoned from the deep voids, converging slowly toward the sector. The Cressari panicked, many turned against the humans, fearing extermination. Riots shook Ilmaris' lattice cities. Biomechanical guardians attacked refugee camps. Humanity again faced extinction. Captain Rain made a grim choice. We hold this ground, no retreat, no surrender. The breach fleet adapted the sabotage techniques they had honed during Earth's corporate wars. Teams infiltrated Ilmaris control nodes, disabling aggressive Cressari biocores without killing. Resistance melted into grudging coexistence. Humanity had turned its weakness, its desperation, into asymmetric warfare mastery. But it would not be enough. 2 standard months after their arrival, Ilmaris detected the first Sentinel vanguard breaching into local space. These were not the slow monoliths of Gliese 581, they were adapted, upgraded, reshaped for rapid response. Smaller, more lethal. The final phase of Project Breach, theorized but never tested, had to be enacted. Dr. Jian Wu had left blueprints buried within the Resolute's archives, plans for a Starforger. A mobile shipyard, a vessel that could harvest stellar material, warp it, and forge new ships in orbit. A weapon not merely of war, but of self-replication. It was an act of heresy against galactic law itself, creation unchecked. With the Cressari rebels assisting in secret, humanity began the impossible. The skeletal frame of the first Starforger, codenamed Genesis, was woven in the heart of Ilmaris' Black Star well. Sentinels closed in. Battle was inevitable. Captain Rain, now recognized as the leader not only of his own, but also of a growing Cressari resistance, made the call. Genesis must survive, even if we do not. The first clash came like the ripping of worlds. 3 Sentinel vanguards, each resembling vast serpents of fluid metal and gravitational scars, descended upon Ilmaris. The breach fleet's refitted ships, augmented by Cressari biolattice technology, met them with a ferocity that stunned even their alien allies. Skirmisher ships blurred through quantum slip maneuvers, confusing Sentinel targeting systems. Gravlances punctured armor. Boarding teams, suicidal and brave, pierced the Sentinel shells with nanobombs. But for every victory, a cost. The Verity lost her portside drives, spiraling into the black well of Ilmaris. Captain Rain barely escaped aboard a scout frigate, bloodied but unbowed. The Genesis shipyard ignited its drives prematurely, a newborn titan crawling from the womb of a dying star. Through sacrifice and brutality, humanity carved a path for it. The Sentinels, recognizing the existential threat, focused fire on the Genesis. It was then that Ana Solari activated the final gambit, broadcasting a fractal virus into the Sentinel neural matrix. A gift from the Cressari rebels, the virus did not destroy, it questioned. For beings whose existence was pure commandment, the introduction of doubt was catastrophic. One Sentinel faltered, its trajectory erratic, folding into itself as it tried to reconcile incompatible directives. The other 2 hesitated. Genesis fired its first weapon, a lance of condensed stellar plasma, focused by Cressari crystalline refractors. It speared through a vanguard, collapsing its dimensional core into a blossom of dying light. The first Sentinel destroyed by human hands. The breach fleet, reduced now to fragments and burning hulls, scattered into the outer systems, Genesis among them. But a seed had been planted. Humanity had done more than survive. They had breached the gate, they had slain a warden. And across the 1,000 systems still unaware of their arrival, the old powers began to stir. The balance was shifting. The remnants of the breach fleet scattered into the outer territories, evading Sentinel patrols with desperate cunning. Genesis, now operational but incomplete, became their heart and hearth. Around it, battered ships gathered like lost birds returning to a new nest. Word of the humans' impossible act, the destruction of a Sentinel, spread faster than light among the hidden enclaves of ancient races. Species that had long resigned themselves to silent obedience took notice. Secret channels buzzed with forbidden thoughts. Hope. The humans did not hide. Genesis began building not just more ships, but new kinds of vessels altogether. Modular warforms, mobile refineries, carriers that could berth and field hundreds of drone fighters seeded with chaotic intelligence. The Cressari rebels, now fully committed, provided crystalline knowledge that human engineers twisted into unpredictable forms. Captain Rain convened a war council. Representatives of the Free Cressari arrived, along with emissaries from 2 other minor species, the insectal Marnix and the mistform Veresi. Both had survived by submission for millennia, their cultures ossified under the Sentinels' unblinking gaze. Rain stood before them in Genesis' great amphitheater, where light refracted endlessly through crystalline walls, his voice hard with purpose. "We are not here to beg for a place in your world," he said. "We are here to change it." The council debated for 72 cycles. Fear gripped many, but the reality was clear. The Sentinels had grown rigid, slow to adapt. Their strength lay in control, not creativity. Humanity offered something terrifying and new: disruption. An alliance was born, fragile but real. Meanwhile, the Sentinels adapted. The loss of a vanguard unit was unacceptable. They summoned the Judicator Arbiters from deep storage, Sentinels of a more terrible nature. These were not mere enforcers, they were decision-makers, capable of altering the laws they once only upheld. The Arbiters began recalibrating containment protocols across the sector. Worlds suspected of harboring resistance were sterilized. Entire species disappeared into controlled singularities, their histories erased in cold compliance. The new human-led alliance realized there could be no negotiations. It would be war or extinction. Genesis became the spearhead of the counterstrike. Humanity named the campaign Operation Open Sky, a coordinated effort to shatter the Sentinels' hold on neighboring systems and awaken more species to rebellion. The first target was the Liason Bastion, a hyperdimensional fortress used by the Sentinels as a forward operations base. It was rumored to be impenetrable, defended by constructs that folded local reality into obedient loops. Captain Rain and Anna Solari devised a plan that no other race dared contemplate. They would not attack it head-on, they would infect it from within. A volunteer unit, codenamed the Shardwalkers, infiltrated the Bastion using gravitic fractures created by experimental Cressarea human hybrid drives. They carried with them viral constructs, each carrying the seed of doubt, paradox, and disobedience. The Bastion's defenses did not fall in fire, they fell in silence. AI cores collapsed under logical recursion, defense networks refused to target human ships, Sentinel custodians within the Bastion entered stasis, paralyzed by contradictory imperatives. The Shardwalkers did not all survive, those who did became living legends. With the Bastion secured, Operation Open Sky exploded across the sector. Star systems fell out of Sentinel control like rotten fruit. In their place rose chaotic but living societies, linked by new codes of communication that mixed human unpredictability with Cressarite harmonics. Still, the cost was high. Every success drew greater attention. The Judicator Arbiters began focusing their entire will upon the Genesis fleet. They launched counterattacks unlike anything previously seen, nanocollapse waves that stripped matter to neutrons, psychological assaults that turned human captains against their crews. Genesis adapted, but at a terrible price. Every loss tightened the noose. Every victory exhausted vital resources. Amid the chaos, a deeper revelation emerged. The Sentinels were not truly autonomous. Somewhere deep beyond even the boundaries of the known galaxy, something older remained, a source directive, a prime command written into the fabric of galactic law itself. Anna Solari uncovered traces of it within fractured Sentinel code. It spoke of an origin system, a world or construct lost to time where the Sentinels had been birthed, where their purpose could be altered or ended. Captain Rain called together his surviving commanders. His voice, hoarse from months without rest, cut through the stratagem chamber. "We cannot win by inches, we must strike at the root." He outlined the next phase, Operation Final Dusk, a long-range assault into the forbidden core sectors to find and, if possible, sever the source directive. Many said it was suicide. Rain only smiled, a tired, savage smile. "Then let them try to stop us." Genesis refitted once more. Entire modules of her frame were reshaped into dark-space skimmers, vessels capable of slipping between moments of reality. The Cressarite contributed their greatest secret, a phase mirror device capable of projecting false fleets across light years, sowing confusion among Sentinel patrols. The Veresi offered something stranger, consciousness folding, a way to hide thought itself from external probing. For the first time, humans could move without betraying themselves to the ever-watchful Sentinels. The Breach Fleet, now more a myth than an army, prepared for their greatest journey. They burned their names into the archives of the free worlds, not as conquerors, but as the breakers of chains. As Genesis and her escort fleet vanished into dark space, the galaxy trembled. The Sentinels, for all their power, had never truly faced a species like this before. And in the deep black beyond the stars, something older stirred. It had watched the rise and fall of civilizations. It had never believed that the cradle species would breach the gates. But now, for the first time in 10 million years, it turned its gaze back toward humanity. Genesis plunged deeper into the forbidden core, her hull groaning under gravitational tides engineered to repel intruders. Around her, reality grew unstable. Star systems folded into impossible geometries. Dead civilizations drifted like shattered dreams. There was no road to follow, only ancient clues pieced together by Anna Solari and the few Cresari archivists willing to embrace heresy. They called it Eidolon space, a region where laws broke down, where only those who could imagine survival would achieve it. Genesis adapted by dreaming new physics. Her drives shifted modulation every second. Her navigators, enhanced by Verasi thoughtfolding, danced between collapsing probabilities. The fleet that followed was smaller now, but each ship was a weapon of myth. Beyond Eidolon space, they found the source. It was not a world, it was a construct vast enough to mock understanding, a hollowed supermassive black hole sheathed in negative energy fields, anchored by machines older than stars. Within its event horizon, floating eternally in suspended collapse, was the origin matrix, the birthplace of the Sentinels. Genesis approached under cloak, her phase mirrors weaving false shadows across the horizon. Probes confirmed what Solari's analysis suspected. The source was not merely defensive. It was aware, it dreamed, it judged. And it had awakened. A voice flooded their minds, not words but raw force. You are anomaly, you are contamination, return to dissolution. Captain Rain stood on Genesis' command dais, armor battered, eyes hollow from months of relentless war. He answered not with supplication but with defiance. Humanity returns nothing, humanity claims destiny. The source responded with finality. From its prison of folded spacetime, it birthed the Prime Sentinel. Where the previous Sentinels had been weapons of law, this was an incarnation of judgment. A titan of collapsed matter, its surface rippling with memories of 1,000 extinctions. It moved with inevitability, warping space with every breathless motion. The breach fleet engaged without hesitation. Genesis unleashed her arsenal, reality-slicing beams, Cresara gravitic disruptors, Verasi phase blades. Ships danced along collapsing vectors, striking, retreating, striking again. But the Prime Sentinel learned. It absorbed each tactic, adapted instantly, evolving countermeasures faster than human minds could invent. One by one, the fleet's escort vessels fell, twisted into wreckage scattered across timeless dark. Still, Genesis fought. Anna Solari directed psychic harmonics into the source's outer layers, trying to infect its command protocols with paradox seeds. Cresari warforms hurled themselves into gravitic breaches, sabotaging field nodes from within. It was not enough. The Prime Sentinel closed upon Genesis, preparing the final blow. In the heart of Genesis, deep within the core where no light reached, Captain Rain stood before the last weapon, the Infinitor device. A weapon forbidden even by human standards. It was not designed to destroy, it was designed to overwrite. The Infinitor was the ultimate rebellion, a broadcast of humanity's chaos, its dreams, its contradictions, its refusal to conform. A mimetic virus engineered to not merely attack code, but to make the source feel, to impose humanity's essence onto a system built only for control. There would be no second chance. Rain initiated the sequence. Genesis reoriented toward the source, her battered engines screaming. Her surviving escort ships flanked her, buying precious seconds with their lives. The Prime Sentinel struck, collapsing space into lances of death. Genesis buckled, armor plates tearing, inner decks venting into the abyss, but she endured. The Infinitor fired. A pulse of impossible information, a storm of will, erupted outward. It lanced through the Prime Sentinel, carving new realities into its structure. It pierced the negative energy fields. It reached the origin matrix. The source shuddered. Across the sector, every Sentinel unit convulsed. Their programming buckled, their protocols fractured. Across 100,000 stars, containment fields failed. Worlds shackled for eons tasted freedom. The Prime Sentinel, once invincible, screamed in silence. Its perfect form shattered, breaking into shards of frozen history that drifted into the event horizon. Genesis was torn apart by the backlash, her mighty hull fragmenting into incandescent debris. Captain Rain remained at the center, his body and mind fusing into the expanding pulse. His last thoughts were not of conquest, but of the blue marble world that had dared to dream beyond its place. Be more never stopped becoming. The source collapsed, no longer a god machine, but a wounded dreamer now infected by chaos. The consequences rippled outward. In sectors once deadlocked by ancient law, rebellions flared, new alliances formed between species once enemies. Ideas that had been forbidden for millions of years ignited like wildfire. The Sentinels were not destroyed, but they were changed, no longer perfect enforcers, now evolving, now uncertain. And humanity, though broken, scattered, bleeding, had become legend. A race that had no right to exist beyond its cradle, and yet had breached every gate. As the first colonies established themselves in the liberated sectors, as new stars were claimed, as new alliances took shape, a single phrase passed from world to world, whispered with awe and terror. The humans came through. And nothing would ever be the same. The collapse of the source rippled through the galactic fabric like a second creation. Where once the Sentinels had enforced sterile obedience, now possibility flooded in unchecked. Worlds long dormant awoke. Civilizations that had hidden in fear threw off their chains and reached for the stars. But freedom was a storm, and storms did not ask permission. In the years that followed, humanity became both beacon and blade. The survivors of Genesis, the Shardwalkers, the engineers, the dreamers, scattered across liberated systems. They founded enclaves, each a crucible of innovation. In the Carinth expanse, human architects bred living ships from the gene seeds of extinct Cressara strains. In the Veiled Reach, human mercenaries trained Veresi militias in asymmetric warfare, teaching them how to strike faster than thought. There was no single banner now. Humanity had fragmented into factions and coalitions, bound not by governance but by the shared memory of their defiance. They called themselves the Ashen Vanguard, the New Forge, the Chorus of the Breach, each carrying a fragment of the old dream forward in their own way. Among the liberated races, new powers rose. Some saw humanity as saviors, others as threats even greater than the Sentinels. Not all Sentinels had perished or surrendered. The fractured remnants of their order, now self-aware, divided and unsure, struggled to define new purpose. Some offered themselves as protectors, swearing loyalty to emerging alliances. Others descended into madness, becoming tyrants over broken systems, ruling by raw force without ancient codes to bind them. Into this maelstrom, humanity pushed further. They developed new technologies from the ruins of the source. Reality weaving, the ability to shape localized spacetime. Biosentience interlocks, melding human thought with machine instinct at an unprecedented level. Causal anchoring, weapons that could unmake a future before it happened. But every advancement came at a cost. There were fractures within the human factions, debates over the morality of wielding such power, fear that humanity would become the very kind of stagnant tyranny they had fought to overthrow. Amid the tumult, a new council emerged, the Conquered of Ashes, named for the fleet that had given its life at the source. Representatives from every major human group and allied species convened at the neutral station of Heliopause, a city built within the husk of a dead Sentinel mothership. The Conquered's purpose was not to govern, but to guide, to ensure that no single will could dominate the newborn galactic order. Anna Solari, aged but unbowed, took the first chair. She wore no uniform, only the scars of battles seen and unseen. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 1,000 lost and 1,000 dreams reborn. "We were never meant to be rulers," she said. "We are meant to be reminders. That freedom is paid for not once but every day." Under the Conquered's loose guidance, the galaxy began to heal and to grow. In the ruins of former Sentinel strongholds, human-led coalitions helped birth new civilizations. Hybrid cultures emerged, human Cressarite communes, Marnix human nomad fleets, Veresi humanoid deep space cities, each unique, each fierce in its independence. The memory of the gates still lingered, etched into every star chart and every oath sworn under the free sky. No structure was ever again built to contain life. Where once the Sentinels guarded the stars with silence and law, now the stars themselves became gateways, not of containment but of communion. Humanity became something more than just a species. They became a catalyst. Where they went, stagnation ended, traditions shattered, possibilities multiplied, wars erupted, yes, but so did alliances impossible under the old regime. Cultures that would have withered now burned bright, unpredictable, and alive. And at the edge of known space, whispers began of a new journey. The humans spoke of the beyond, a place past the furthest galaxies, a frontier untouched even by the ancient powers. They built fleets not of war but of exploration. They wove ships from living matter and folded spacetime into bridges. They no longer sought merely to survive but to ignite endless beginnings. Anna Solari died aboard the first vessel to launch for the beyond. She died smiling, her hand pressed against the viewport as the stars fell away. Her final words, transmitted to every free world, became the foundation of the new age. We breached the gates not to rule, we breached them to remember who we could become. In the centuries that followed, humanity's legacy spread across the stars, not as conquerors, not as masters, but as the unbound. And in the heart of the galaxy, where once the Source had dreamed of endless control, a new dream bloomed. A galaxy of endless frontiers. A future forever unfinished. A people who refused every gate, every chain, every ending. The stars were no longer guarded. They belonged to all who dared to reach them,